All right. Hi, Ydaiber. Thank you so much for coming and being on Mom on the Verge. I am so excited about this conversation.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to see you and finally meeting you in
Yes.
person.
Yes, in virtual person. That's how we do things these days.
Yes.
So I will just kind of set you up as saying that you are an expert in human design, and that's a lot of what our conversation is going to be about. But you also do a lot of work on purpose and authenticity. So we'll be touching on those topics as well. So how about you tell us how you got into the world of human design and your passion and purpose and authenticity coaching that you do? And then maybe give us, because I think there's probably a lot of people out there who have no idea what I mean when I say human design. So if you could give us a little outline on what that is as well.
Absolutely. So first of all, I have wore a lot of hats in my life. So I have gone through a lot of jobs, a lot of professions. I am one of those people who likes to experiment and try things. I've been in the wellness industry. I've been in the hospitality industry. I've been in the entertainment industry, still in the entertainment industry. I am an actor and a voiceover artist, and I still do that. But as I was doing that, I started to feel that my initial why had shifted because I became very focused on the business. I became very focused on the results. If I didn't get a job, then I would get frustrated. It didn't matter that maybe I had a lot of fun creating a character. It was just about, well, but I still didn't get the job. So when I started to notice that about myself, I started asking myself questions. I got really curious about what was going on beneath all of that. As all of that was happening, I experimented a lot of losses in my life. I lost both of my siblings. I lost my dad most recently in 2021. And the loss of my dad was literally the catalyst for me to like finally go through my full on spiritual awakening. I think I've been doing it in steps for many, many years. I started, it's funny because the other day I was talking to my husband about it. I'm like, I started reading about reincarnation when I was 13. And we're talking about this is like the 90s. Like
Right.
nobody around me is doing this. And I'm just like, ooh, past lives. Ooh, like I always been a very curious person. And I think that I have been planted the seeds for this new iteration of my life for many years. When I was working in hospitality, my favorite part of my job was to mentor people, was to help people to go into the next level themselves. And whenever anybody got promoted, that was my win. That was my way to be like, oh, I'm good at this. But I never realized that even though everybody was reaching out to me constantly for help, for advice, that I could become a coach. It was just not something that necessarily happen naturally. It happened literally by being hit in the head many times. Like, when you're in that space of being in the deepest, darkest place of your soul, where it's like, what am I going to do with my life? And then starting to put myself back together after all this pain and all these losses, and realizing that I was brought into this world to be a mirror for other people, to inspire, to motivate, to really lift people up. And my first experimentation with this world was becoming an emotion code practitioner. So for those of you who have never heard of emotion code, the best way I like to compare it to is Reiki, because you say Reiki and everybody nowadays know what Reiki is. So it's energy healing, but it's just a different method. It was created by a doctor, and this doctor created this method in order to help people release trapped emotions that have been stuck in our bodies probably since the time that we were born, and sometimes even inherited. So even before we came into this world, they were already planted. So I started with the emotion code because since I was grieving, that was for me the most immediate way to access my pain, to get rid of it, to reset it, to reprogram it, and to start noticing the results rather quickly. So in 2018, I was working for that wellness company that I was talking about. And one of my coworkers, I was probably like the only woman in her 40s in this office. Everybody was like 25. And I'm like, oh my God, all these youngsters here. But what that gave me was this beautiful access to a lot of things that I had never heard of. And one of them was human design. So this girl comes up to me and she's like, oh my God, you're so authentic. You're so cool. You're so this. And I think that you should get a human design to see what you are. And I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, what's your sign? And I'm like, I'm a Leo. And she's like, okay, what's your rising? And I'm like, I don't know. So it started with that kind of conversation. And then it's just sparked this interest in me. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to get a reading and figure out what human design is. So human design is a practice that includes a combination of science, quantum physics, astrology, chakra system, Kabbalah. So all of these systems are integrated to show you the blueprint of literally who you came to be in this life. And what I love about it is that it shows you both the conscious side, most likely the side that you are familiarized with, the side that most likely is very attuned with your astrological sign, and then the side that has not been expressed, the unconscious side, the side that maybe we feel it, but we kind of haven't really put it out there because of fear, because of society, because of whatever reason. So when we look at both sides and you start to integrate them, that kind of forms the full picture of who you could potentially become. So it's called actually the human design experiment, because, you know, we are meant to be testing things out and trying things out and see how all of this resonates. So with human design, it gives you literally a blueprint and an overview of how you're supposed to be making decisions in life, how you're supposed to be using your energy, how you're supposed to be living your day to day, how are you supposed to be showing up in your world, how are you supposed to function in the morning, are you supposed to be having routines or not? I mean, there's a lot of more intricate things that I'm not even qualified to do yet when it comes to like your digestions. All of that is even interrelated with human design. It's really, really, really fascinating. So that's the shortest version of how I got into human design.
Okay, that is fascinating. Just so fascinating. And I think if you've been on this journey of like investigating yourself for a while, because you and I talked right before we got on camera, and I said I absolutely want to have is it like my chart read, or how do you even say it?
Yeah,
I want
my
chart read. That I feel like, you know, I've been on this path of self-discovery for a really long time. And in the last couple of years, I've really like leaps and bounds, changes in leaps and bounds. And I think a lot of that chart, I would be like, yes, like I know that, like that makes sense now. But I denied it for a really long time because it didn't fit in with cultural expectations of how I was supposed to operate. And so do you find like, so it's almost like a permission giving, like a lot of that chart could be a permission giving, like, oh, like I knew this intuitively. I felt this, but I felt like it was wrong because this is not the way I see the rest of, you know, the world operating. But now this is giving me permission to operate in the way that I have already always authentically knew was right for me. So do you see that in your clients?
I see both sides, which is very interesting. The majority of the times it's exactly what you described. It's people who already know this, because we all know this, and all we have to do is start to peel those layers that we have placed ourselves and the society has placed on us for years and years, our parents, you know, all of that. So it's almost like removing these layers and starting to give permission to show up as the full self that you're meant to be. We're all designed differently, yet we're all living life as if there was one way to do it.
Yeah.
And that's where human design comes very handy, because it gives you permission to say, oh, I am not meant. I actually posted about this yesterday. I am not meant to have a routine. I am not designed to have a routine. I'm designed to identify the things that light me up and weave them throughout my day somehow, but without having to be strict about it. Like from 7 to 8, that does not resonate with me. It never did. That's why I don't function well in a 9 to 5. And some people might not know that that's the reason. So that's one of the things. On the other side, there are clients who are very resistant to accept that this is part of their design, and they will be like, no, that does not sound like me. And I will be, okay, let's investigate, let's unpack a little bit. And most of the time we realize that this is coming from conditioning from your parents, from conditioning from your environment. Because let's say if you are a projector, you're not meant to be providing energy or even working for long periods of time. So that means that you might be someone who either need to take naps or just need to retreat often, who might need to just work in solitude for a little bit and then go back to a team. But that's not the way society shows that that's how you get things done, right? They tell you you're supposed to be at work at 9 and you're supposed to finish at 5. And during those 8 hours, you have to be turned on, like everything. You have to give me everything. And that does not go well with the way that you're designed. So for some people who grew up in an environment, surrounded by generators. So let's say that you are a projector, but your mom, your dad, and then you ended up marrying a generator. Everybody has shown you the way that a generator runs. And just so you know, the world is run by generators. There's 60% of us. Okay. So we are the mother of the world. So everybody else assumes that that's what they have to do.
Yes, you're speaking to me. I mean, I know you're not, and you're speaking to everyone, but you're speaking to me.
Yes. And that's what I find a lot. So sometimes a projector might come to me and say, no, I do get things done. I say, but how does that feel? Right. Does that feel aligned? Does that feel easy?
Yes.
Because it should feel easy. And I think that whenever something in life, whatever it is, it's not feeling easy, we need to stop and ask ourselves, put human design aside. But that's usually a red flag to ask ourselves, am I supposed to be doing this? Is this the best way for me to be doing this? And again, I find human design is a wonderful tool, but also applying human design and putting human design aside, it's all about how do we become better humans that are more aligned with our internal needs. When we are hearing the voice, when we're hearing and following that bliss, that flow, versus going against the current constantly, which is so exhausting.
So exhausting. And when I hear you talk about this, my mind immediately goes to work, like in the way that we work. And, I did come from parents who, I came from a first generation to this country. And so, they worked really hard and really long hours. And there was essentially a mantra in our household of working hard and saving your money, work hard, save your money. And so I grew up with that. And then I married another first generation immigrant, and he grew up with the same mantra: work hard, save your money, go to school, get a job, work hard, save your money. And working hard meant working extremely long hours, which his parents did and my parents did. And, they provided a beautiful life for us, but this is how it's done. And this is the only way that it's done. And so enter me, who is like, feels very bad in my body. Like that feels like I'm swimming against the current. And then feeling very guilty that I feel like that. Because my husband, I mean, I don't know what he is, but I mean, the way you're speaking, I think he's probably a generator. Like he's go, go, go. He's got tons of energy. He can work long hours. Like he does get tired, but like he's got this internal fire that I do not have. Not a day in my life did I have it, right? It's just not who I am. He doesn't need tons of alone time. He doesn't need to like regenerate the way that I do on such a regular basis. And so I came from this family, he came from this family, then I married this man who's a generator, and I'm thinking, what the heck is wrong with me? That the idea of going to a 9 to 5 for my entire life makes me want to not go on. like it's that strong. It is that strong, that feeling inside of me. And so I actually ended up becoming a nurse. One, because I have, just a true heart of service, like I know that I'm here to serve. And so when I became a nurse, that was just a way of serving. But one of the beautiful things about that was that I don't work every day. So it's, when you're a nurse, you usually work 3 on and 4 off, or, however you break it up, but you're definitely not there every day. And then I went to part-time. So I only worked 2 days a week. And even in those 2 days a week, I'm there for 12 straight hours and I'm on for 12 straight hours. And the level of exhaustion that comes for me for being there for 12 straight hours, even if it's not a busy day, is insane.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many times I've thought to myself, like, what is wrong with you? Why are you so tired? You work 2 days a week. What does the matter with you? People go to work every day. And so there's a lot of guilt that comes with that. And so this information is just, it's liberating, you know, to hear and to know that it's like, there's not actually anything wrong with me. It's just, it's just the way I was designed. And to accept that.
Totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that when you start also learning through human design, there's a part that we touch on, at least I as a reader do, because I find it that is so crucial, which is understanding how your chakra system is designed. And what I mean by this is when you look at your chart, and the first time that you look at it, it's going to make no sense. All you're going to see some triangles and rectangles. It just doesn't make any sense. But there's these chakras that are what we call defined or undefined. So when these chakras are defined, that means that this energy is sustained in these particular areas. It's like self-generating. When they're not defined, that means that we're absorbing the energy from this area, from whoever is around us. So I'm going to give you a simple example. So most likely as a projector, if you were a projector, you don't have your sacral defined. As a generator, we have the sacral defined. That's like the number one difference. And that's why we have this energy, because in the sacral is where you create everything. You create life. That's where your genitals are. That's where your creativity comes from, right? So it doesn't mean that projectors are not creative. What it means is that when you combine a projector with a generator and you put them to create something, the projector can feed off that energy of the generator to get something done. So, however, it could be draining if you're surrounded by someone like me, if I'm lit up about something, I will not stop. So if I'm like, you're like, oh my God, I need a break from her. She's too much. I can't handle her. And it's not, and again, going back to what you're explaining, it's like, it's not that I'm too much, or it's just that you're not designed to put up with this for more than 2-3 hours. You gotta be like removed from the situation. Go take a break.
Yeah.
So that's what it is, you know. And when you understand that, and you tell people around you that that's the way you function, I think the communication is such an important part of it, because it's like, well, you know that I can only go to your party for a couple of hours because after that I need to recharge by myself. And then people start understanding that, and we start educating people around us to see the world the way we see it. Can you imagine if we knew the designs of our kids, and from the beginning, you know that these mad scientist energy creator kid that we have, it's meant to be functioning that way. It doesn't need to be constrained. It doesn't need to be contained. It just needs to express. I mean, it makes such a big difference when you have these tools in your hands.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you about that because, well, I guess a couple of questions. Do you think that our human design is our human design from the moment we come into this, or like this life, and it never changes throughout our life? It's the same.
It is.
Okay.
There are, however, and I don't know enough about this yet, there are universal changes that will affect things in our design, but it does not change your design itself. So as a matter of fact, when I was talking about your conscious side and your unconscious side sign is believed to enter your body, if you will. That's when the soul enters your body. It's said to be around 90 days before you were born. So it is, again, that's when it's completely related to astrology and quantum physics.
Okay.
So that's why it can't change, because it's associated with the time that you were born and the time that your soul entered your body. So that won't change.
Okay. That's also fascinating on a different level, because I'm a labor and delivery nurse, and I can't tell you how many people schedule their inductions or they schedule their C-sections. And I've always thought, like, what does that mean? Like, how does that impact the soul that they're their date of delivery or their birthday has been chosen versus something that just kind of naturally occurred. And sometimes there's really good medical reasons for that, for us to do that. So do you know if that impacts the design, the human design?
I don't know for sure, but I'm almost certain that I have heard from my teachers that it does not.
It does not. Okay. So maybe that was the plan all along. And okay. Yeah. Interesting. All right. The other thing that I wanted to touch on, you mentioned like knowing your kids and like, I'm sure knowing your partner, because the communication is probably so much better when you know what your family members or friends or whatever their human design is, because you just understand them on a different level. So I also am a yoga teacher, and during my yoga teacher training, we learned about the Enneagram. Are you familiar at all with the Enneagram?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So that was a huge eye opener for me as well, because it went into so much detail about each of these numbers. So for our listeners, the Enneagram is I don't know what you would call, I actually don't know what it's called, but it's a system where there's 9 different categories that you can fall into. And based on which category you fall into, it describes a lot of your ways of being in the world and how you are at your best. Like I'm a 9. So how I am at my best 9 and how I behave when I'm not in alignment and I'm kind of like not at my best 9 and so on and so forth. And then there are like shadow numbers as well. But it was very insightful to learn about that, and then to learn about what my kids were and my husband was. And it gave me so much more grace for when we were struggling to communicate, or I didn't understand why someone was behaving in a way that they were behaving or doing something that they were doing. It was like, oh, well, this makes a lot of sense in the context of your Enneagram number. So I could see that also being true with human design and like just improving relationships.
Absolutely. Absolutely. My husband is a manifestor generator. And for years, we've been together forever, like years. And once we understood his human design, we almost, again, gave ourselves permission to be like, oh, that's why you don't finish projects.
Right.
And and it sounds like something negative, but what I learned to rephrase it as was like, you finish the projects until you're still excited about them. The moment that you lose any interest for whatever reason, we know it's time to give them up. And there's so much shadow around that, right? Because if you tell somebody, for example, you're a nurse today and tomorrow you're going to open a restaurant, and then 3 months later you're like, I really don't feel like I want to be cooking that much, and then the following time you decide that you want to open a center for kids, and then 3 months later you're like, nope, and you keep trying things, people are not going to take you seriously, right? Instead of people saying, that is so cool that she gets to try things out without any agenda in mind other than experimenting and having fun and see where it goes, with that open-minded of like, I don't know what's going to happen with this. I wonder if it's going to work out. I'm going to give it my best and I'm going to enjoy it as much as I can. But the moment that you don't enjoy it anymore, that's it. It's giving yourself that permission to be like, this was never meant to be the end of it anyways. So with my husband, that's kind of like how we run things now. Like whenever he has an inkling to do something, it's like, sure, go for it. And we have to wait and see for how long he will be interested in. And when we notice that he goes back, and that's something that a lot of manifestor generators do, they might just stop something. And months later, they will be like, I want to pick this up again. And they just go back to it. So it's like we as the wives giving them the permission to be like, yeah, babe, go for it. That, as long as it's lighting you up, as long as it's making you happy, because that's how they find their own joy. Yeah. So again, very different than what society has told us.
Yes, very different. And also very, it could be very difficult, right? Because if you have someone who's like, I want to be a cook, and now I want to be a carpenter, and now I want to be a whatever, we still have to pay the bills, right? So does it help people, I don't know how to explain it, like figure out how to be solidly in themselves, their human design, but still function in society in the best possible way?
I'm going to give you an example actually related to my husband, because that will be a good way to explain it. My husband and I met in hospitality school. We both wanted to be in the hotel world business when we were 18 years old. Since then, I have changed career many times. For him, we're talking about 25 plus years. He's still in the hospitality business. Mm-hmm. However, even right now, he works in different departments, and he loves that because it gives him that newness, right? It gives him that opportunity to not be stuck with doing the same thing all the time. That just is just like, it's a soul killer for him. Yeah. So there are ways around it, but I think it's almost like you got to find your own way to go about it so that you still become successful at whatever that you do, right? That is sustainable financially. Right. Let's say that you're a coach. Well, maybe you still experiment a little bit by trying different approaches to coaching or different type of certifications or different types of, instead of a life coach, now I'm going to specifically work with teenagers. You know what? That didn't really resonate. Let me try working with kids instead. So it's like, it's giving yourself that flexibility within the normal life of having to provide, right? And having to generate an income. But yeah, there are ways to do it, but that's when creativity really plays a big role in it as well.
Yeah. I'm thinking about my daughter I have two children. My daughter's 15 and my son is 10. And when I think about my daughter, I think she's getting close to the age where she think about going to college and what she wants to major in and all that. And I'm thinking every kid before they go to college should do this human design, right? I mean, they should do this and figure themselves out a bit to help them make the right choices as they move forward. I mean, do you see that? Do people do that for their children? Is it too new still for that to be happening?
It's too new. I think what I'm finding more with my clients who want to do human design for their kids is usually younger kids, like 5, 6, 7-year-old kids, that they just want to understand why they're not following the traditional path in school, and they tend to be the disruptors, they tend to be the outside of the box thinkers. And even the way that they express is a little different, and they want to understand where that's coming from. So usually it comes down to dealing with kids that, again, are outside of the norm. So, and by the norms, I'm talking about the majority. So when kids tend to isolate themselves, or when kids say, I need my time out, or where is that coming from? Maybe it is something related to their design that could be helpful for you as a parent to understand.
Yeah, it's interesting. Right before I got on this call with you, I was on another call with a group of moms, and it was literally a whole conversation about motherhood. And we were talking about education, and it was a small group. There were only, I think, 5 of us on the group. And out of the 5 of us on the group, 4 out of the 5 had their children in some form of alternative schooling, whether it be homeschooling, unschooling. I forget, I think there was another one on there. And my children are just in regular public school. But my son, I have been feeling for a long time that maybe that route is not the best option for him. And so it's just interesting that you're saying this, because I'd be interested to do his human design and then figure out maybe there is another way that he can be better served. Because for our children, school is where they spend so much of their day in their childhood, and it can either build their self-esteem or it can tear it down. And for many kids, the public school system doesn't work for them, and it really just tears their self-esteem down and prevents them from being their authentic selves, right? It's really just not, it does not work for them, and it does not allow them to be authentic. And then they feel like there's something wrong with them, because when they want to express themselves authentically, it's not resonating in this particular space. And then what does that reflect back to?
It's not the right environment where that kind of disruption will be actually embraced. And it's the opposite. It's looked at in a negative way, with a negative connotation.
Exactly.
And I also wanted to clarify something, when you were asking the question about college. I think that's something that we got to remind ourselves, is that our purpose is not our job, and it's not our career. And many times we associate these choices as being something so definitive, right? And it's like the one thing that you're going to go to school for, it's going to define I would challenge you. I would challenge you on those thoughts. And I think as a parent, I would challenge you to allow your kid to discover that by themselves and give them the permission and the understanding that if they choose to change things in the middle of it or later, or many of them will maybe complete the degree and then realize afterwards that is not the thing that really lights them up any longer, you know. So I think that's where we play the big role of guiding them to understand that not one decision like that, it's going to be what it will shape the rest of your life. It will shape that moment in your life. It will open or close certain doors because they're meant to be or not, but it will not be the last thing that they get to do. So I think it's very important to, even if you utilize human design to kind of understand your natural gifts, I think it's better to use human design. It's better served to use it to, how am I supposed to be making decisions? Am I supposed to be responding? Am I supposed to be sitting and analyzing things? Am I supposed to be just like going with my gut? Because that's where we want to teach our kids, or we want to teach them to be connected to their bodies, so that when they have a gut feeling, they know what that means. They know what that feels like, because they've been working on that since they were kids. Right. And those instincts, and we, society, we tell them, no, you have to think things through. It's like, well, how about if we feel things through instead of think them through? And I think that those are the things where, again, human design could be helpful, but there's also many other tools that we can help with.
Yeah, definitely. And when you said, I think we don't have to think things through, we have to feel things through, full body chills, like so resonated, because it's so true. And I know for myself, like I am currently a nurse, but I was a teacher before that. And I worked for a nonprofit before that. And now I'm a podcaster and entering the coaching field. And like, I've made many, many transitions in my lifetime. So I certainly know that like what you go to school for does not define the rest of your life. But I also think like if I had known myself better when I was younger, I maybe could have made some different choices and enjoyed the path more. How about, I would say that, enjoyed the process more, because I think I didn't know myself as well. And I was also trying to fit into culturally expected boxes, and then boxes that were expected from my family of origin, and all these boxes, versus feeling the permission to just go with my gut, go with my instinct. That was something that I had to learn as an adult, versus learning it as a young person. And I've tried to teach my kids from the time that they were verbal that like you go with your gut. But it's hard. I think it's hard in our society because there's so much coming at you, so much influence coming at you from outside.
Yes, there is. And luckily I didn't have as much of that when I was a teenager, because there was no social media. There was not even internet. So, so all I had as a reference was around me, right? But I think that a big part that also plays a role in this is, you talk a lot about it already, is authenticity, right? And that's a word that could be very triggering for a lot of people, because when you tell somebody, well, you're not living authentically, I bet that most people are gonna reject that notion. They're gonna be like, no, of course I'm authentic. And it's like, are you really? And I think that, sure, human design is an amazing tool that can help you reconnect with that. But there's also a lot of other tools that can help you start to understand how to better show up every single day in everything that you do that is consistent, that you don't have to be a separate person at work, a separate person with your kids, a separate person when you're with your best friends drinking wine. How about if we get to be all those things fully in every single moment of our lives?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. But it feels scary to a lot of people to do that. They feel scared to do that. And a lot of that comes from probably previous experiences in their life that they carry forward with them. But that I think permission giving is one of the most transformational tools that I've seen work for people, is that someone else gives them permission by saying, look, I've experienced the same thing. I've gone through the same thing. You're not alone, that you're not alone, or that we start to learn how to give it to ourselves, which is probably the most powerful piece, is that we learn how to give ourselves permission.
And even using things like social media that again could be so triggering sometimes, start curating those spaces so that that the content that you're receiving is the content that will actually help you and be of benefit for you. And when you're getting triggered, you're not getting triggered in a negative way, but you're getting either inspired, or you get like, I could do what she's doing. Or so it's almost like an expansion, right? Like you get amplified by the content that you're consuming versus feeling constricted, versus feeling less than, versus feeling I am not enough because I don't have, or I don't do what she does. So it's like we need to be very responsible and take charge and ownership of what we consume day in and day out.
Yes, 100%. And my feed, if anybody looks at any of my feeds, that it's everything's positive, everything's inspirational, everything, because that's what I need. That's what I need to continuously stay at an elevated state. And I think we don't recognize how much what we consume can pull us down and pull us out of a higher vibration state. And then that drips into every aspect of our life. So totally. So how does this work as far as purpose? So human design helps us understand like kind of who we are, how we work, how we operate, what works for us, what doesn't, but what about actually determining purpose? So you mentioned earlier in the conversation that, you had done all these other things, but all along, like you kind of were a coach, like deep down you were a coach, but you were doing all these other things. And that is 100% how I feel. Now, first of all, I also grew up in the 90s. We're probably similar in age. I never even heard of a coach.
Exactly.
Other than a sports coach. I mean, there's like no life coaches out there. I don't know when that started. So it really wasn't ever on my radar because I just never heard of such a thing. And then once it did come onto my radar, coming from like this immigrant, hardworking family, I was like, that's ridiculous. Why would someone pay for that? And then having finally had some coaching of my own, I was like, oh my gosh, A, this is amazing. And B, this is my purpose. Like, this is what I was sent here to do. And I've actually been doing it in my life, my entire life, as long as I can remember, but just in a very informal capacity. So, but it took a lot of weaving and twists and turns and ups and downs and all over the place to get there. So how does human design help people, target or understand their purpose better?
Tons. And there's 3 areas that I would say probably are the most significant to weave them into our purpose. One is our energy type. So energy type is going to be like the main way that you came to this world to function like, right? So again, generators, reflectors, projectors, manifestor generators. I think I missed one. There's 5 of them. And once you understand how you're supposed to function on your day-to-day, that already gives you a clue, right? About, okay, these are the things, these are the careers, these are the people that I want to associate myself with. This is how I want to spend my day. So already that's starting to relate with purpose. Then you have the element of making decisions, right? What is your strategy? How are you supposed to be making decisions in your day? So usually when we talk about purpose, we talk about what is that thing that you could do for free, right? Like if you didn't have to monetize it, what could you be doing all day long, right? And for me, it's having these conversations and performing. That's it. Somebody recently asked me, because I asked him this question and I challenged him and I said, okay, so if you were able to do anything that you could do in life and money was not an object, what would you be doing? And he told me what would it be, which was completely different and nothing related to what he was doing. And he said, okay, well, how about you? And I'm like, exactly what I'm doing. Yeah. And that was so powerful because I think that's the first time that I actually get to say that. Yeah. And sure, if money was not an object, right? That's the thing that sometimes stops us from fully living our purpose because we relate success with money and because we do need to survive at the end of the day. So when you understand how you're supposed to be responding to these things and making decisions and what lights you up and start following that thread of bliss, of joy, then you start once again putting 2 and 2 together. And it's like, ooh, this must be something that I could probably potentially be doing. So that's another way to relate to purpose. And then within human design, there's something called gates. And those are numbers that when you see your chart, they're not going to mean anything to you when you see them for the first time. And you are going to notice that some of those gates are activated. And what that means, those are your natural gifts. Those are the things that come easy for you. Doesn't mean that those are the things that you have to do, because again, human design is not predicting anything. It's just giving you the blueprint, and it's on you to choose how you're going to use it, how you're going to weave that into your life. So once you understand your natural gifts, for me, that was a big aha moment, because also something that was actually really funny, I noticed that I did not have the gate of performing activated. And I'm like, this is not right. And there's actually a line that goes between two gates. So that means when two lines are connected, and I'm speaking gibberish to you guys right now, but it's called a channel. So that makes it even more powerful. When you have two gates that go from one center to another center and is activated, then that means that you definitely want to be looking at those channels. So, and it's called the channel of performing, or the channel of something along those lines. So that's usually, you see people who have that line, those are like the Meryl Streeps, the people, the big directors, the big writers, they usually have that line activated. And I didn't even have any of the gates activated. And I'm like, something is off. And then I'm looking at my husband's design, and he has that line activated. And we're like, oh, that's why mine is so activated, because I'm with you so much. We've been together for so long, because I didn't really started to pursue performing professionally until I was with him. I always liked acting. I always liked writing. I always liked it. I did some stuff when I was a kid. I would put plays together in my building. I mean, I always created. But as far as like thinking of it as a purpose, thinking of it as a profession, I didn't do it until I was with him. And we don't know if that's the answer or not, but it was just so funny to realize it, that his is activated and mine is not. And he's the film director as well, and film editor. And he actually edits my podcast because he's into this world as well. Right. So anyways, I just thought that was so fascinating. So gates, channels are other part in human design where you can see your natural gifts and see how you can integrate that into your purpose.
Which is also, I think that's super helpful for people too, because again, if I'm thinking about myself, and I know I'm not alone, some people can have like, they're really great at math, or they're really good at drawing, or they have this very obvious thing that they're very good at, or multiple things. Like my husband, numbers, fixing anything, building anything, like it's very obvious that these are the things that he's very good at. And for me, my skills are more soft skills, right? I am an excellent listener. I want to hear people's stories all day long. I am a reflector. I'm, reflecting back to people and helping them see what they can't see. I could just have conversation with people all day long. But when you think about that, you're like, that's not a skill. That's right.
It is.
But it is.
It comes naturally for you. It feels easy. That's what I mean.
Yes, it feels so natural and easy. And I think we take for granted the things that come natural and easy to us. And we think it's natural and easy for everyone because it's natural and easy for us. Yeah. And then we're not seeing our own talents and gifts and genius. We're not seeing our own genius. There's this other podcaster, I forget his name. He has a book called Sparked, but he calls it your zone of genius. And I love that term. And like, it's very hard sometimes for people to see their own zone of genius.
Yeah, so, I call it superpowers. Some people also call it superpowers. And for me, part of when I work with people one-on-one or in programs it's literally nailing down those superpowers. It's like, let's dial them down, because when you understand that, when you actually realize that that's actually something that not everybody has, that it is very unique to you, because let's say, oh yeah, well, you have the power. One of your superpowers is communication. It comes easy to you. I communicate very easily with people. My throat chakra is open, so forth and so on. Wonderful. What else is unique and only yours? Because communicating is very broad. So what is your way to communicate? Oh, well, I'm actually very good at talking, or I'm very good at writing, or I'm very good at listening. Okay, well, let's hone that down. So even that, we can unpack it to a place where it will be so specific and unique to you that it feels special. It feels like these are my superpowers. And even though somebody else might have them, no one else in the world is going to express that the way that you will express it.
Yeah. Yeah, that is so cool. That is so cool. And in this journey for me of now becoming an entrepreneur and starting my own business, it will be very interesting to see what comes up, because I think there are many different ways of doing that, and some ways feel good and some ways don't. And I'm learning what feels good and what doesn't, but it's hard because it's a very confusing space with a lot of advice coming at you. And so anyway, I'll be interested to see what comes out of that.
Yeah, me too.
As well.
Me too.
All right. Well, we're almost up on our time. Is there anything else that you would like to share with the audience? Tell us about your podcast that you have, and then your coaching program, and then of course, anything else that we haven't covered.
Sure. Okay. So my website is called Rekindle Your Light. And if you listen to my podcast, which is also called Rekindle Your Light, you will understand why it's called that. But in a few words, I am all about helping people find their inner light by harnessing their purpose, by harnessing their grit, their resilience, and being like, okay, let's figure out what makes you unique, what makes you special, and then let's create it and put it up there. Let's get it done. That's a big mantra of mine. Let's get shit done. Let's just do it instead of just talking about it. So my programs are always going to be geared around that. So at the moment, I have the option of working one-on-one in a 12-week container where we literally make the program very personalized and we focus specifically on you. It includes some human design. It includes emotion code. It includes pretty much all the practices that I'm very familiar with. And on the group coaching side, that's going to be started in the new year. I'm going to have a group that it will include hot seat coaching. So you'll still get like that one-on-one. Obviously, the format is way shorter because I get to see several people at once. And the focus of that is also going from self-doubt to creative empowerment. So it's like, if there's one thing that you want to create, this is a good formatting, in the sense that I'll take you from going through that imposter syndrome, self-doubt, and then transform it into something that you're ready to put out there in the world, whatever that is. So when I talk about creativity, I don't mean you have to be an artist. I just mean you have to be a creator of anything, or creatrix, which is the term that I like using for myself. So those are my programs. The podcast itself, I cover stories of resilience. I cover stories of grief. I cover stories of life after death, because I'm fascinated by that theme, angels. So I kind of weave in all the spiritual stuff into my podcast, and that's the beauty of creating it my way. So I get to do whatever I want with it. And I'm sure it will pivot and change as we go. And that's it as far as like, how to work with me. You can find me on Instagram under my name, which is Ydaiber. So very, very easy to find me. And if there's one thing I would like to say to anybody who's listening, is sometimes the toughest thing is to take that first step to invest in ourselves. And I was you many years ago. I was all of you when I had that fear, where I was unclear. There was a lot of lack of clarity in my life, where I didn't know what I wanted to do in my life. And I think that sometimes we expect that magically the answer is just going to roll out in our door and we're going to read it and it's going to be there. And unfortunately, it never happens that way. Sometimes it's literally just a whisper. Sometimes it's just a dream. Sometimes it's a word that comes out in a meditation. Sometimes it's a movie that we watch. It's an image, it's a sign, it's a feather that we find outside. It comes in many different ways. Inspiration comes in many different ways. So if we stay aware and open, we can listen to that message and then start taking that first step, whatever that first step means for you. So I invite you to consider, what is that one thing that coming now into the new year, you would like to set up as an actual goal, not as a resolution, but as an actual goal, and say, I know that by the end of next year, I want to have my podcast, or I want to have a movie, or I want to move to another country, whatever that is. But let's start making clear decisions about what we want to create our life to be like.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, most of the women, I say women, my audience is mostly women, but I actually do have like a decent amount of male listeners too, which is surprising to me, but thank you for being here. I think that, there are a lot of moms who listen to this podcast, and we often put ourselves last on the list. And we forget about our own passions and purpose because we are so gripped by the responsibility of motherhood, and feel that we don't have time, or we don't have the energy, or we don't have the money to put towards it, or whatever we feel that's preventing us from moving in towards our passion, into our purpose. But I think there's no better gift that you can give to yourself and to your children than by doing that, by stepping into your passion and your purpose, because you become the best version of yourself. And then you can give that best version to the people that you love, and to the rest of the world, to serve the rest of the world. So,
and they will want to model that. I recently interviewed in my podcast, actually, that episode is coming out next week. I recently interviewed someone who's a mom of 3, and we talked about sensual dancing. And I was like, how do your kids feel about this? And she's like, great. The older ones look at me like I'm weird, and the young one is actually inspired by it. I said, I love it. She's like, you never know, how your actions are going to impact your kids, actually, also in that sense of like opening up their world to all these other possibilities.
Yeah. And our children are just little spiritual beings, and they feel our energetic. They feel, even if you're trying to hide it and you act like you're happy and you act like you're fulfilled and everything's fine, they know, they can feel that. And so I think, we just shouldn't be pretending all the time. We should actually try to, move into our purpose. And even those kids who are rolling their eyes, I feel like one day when they're parents, they're going to look back and be like, you know what, that was like really great what mom did, and maybe I'm going to do the same thing. So yeah.
We give them permission to be themselves, whatever that means to them.
Yes, absolutely. And I don't think there's any better gift that we could give our children than permission to be themselves. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here. And I'm really excited about your podcast and all the work you're doing. And I think we're going to set something up for human design for me, because I'm just so curious as to what's going to come out of that.
I'm looking forward to it. So thank you so much for having me, and hope this was a service for a lot of people.
I hope so too. All right. Thank you so much. And I'll put all your information in the show notes. I'll put all your, your podcast and your website, all your stuff in the show notes. Okay.
Sounds great.
All
okay.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye.